Okay, here we are, Kinesiology 231. This is Module 4. This is a continuation of the conversation of speed and agility. Now, the book lists 4 main tests you can use for speed and agility. By no means is this exhaustive. You could definitely use other speed agility tests that are more specific to a sport per se, but these are the ones the book has outlined for us. The first one's pretty straightforward. Straight line sprint test, 40-yard dash. Now, many times people talk about 40-yard dash. This person has a lot of top-end speed. 40-yard dash is more about acceleration than it is speed, like you'd see in what's classically the 100 meters. Now, granted, there's the argument where 40-yard dash is acceleration, 60-ish, 66 yards or 60 meters would be more like top-end speed. Maybe even 65 to 70 is top end speed, and then the last 20 meters or so when people are doing 100 meters, they're just trying to hang on. So really the 40-yard dash is all about acceleration. And with this, the way they set up the course is you have a start line, they show a 10-yard set of cones, and then they have another set of cones after the finish for 5 yards. And the reason why they have this is you can have different windows of times taken within a 40-yard dash. So 40-yard dash would be all about 0 yards to 40 yards, meaning 0 to maximal acceleration over 40 yards, But the other part of this is you can have a 0 to 10 yard, a 10 to 20 yard, a 20 to 30 yard, and you can measure out even like a flying 20 if you want to have 10 yards to 30 yards in here. It's up to the practitioner and what they deem to be valid and to be important. But the 5 yards at the end, the book denotes that just as a place for the person to decelerate at the end of the test. So they sprint through the finish line and they finish after the line and decelerate for 5 yards. Pretty straightforward. You go ahead and take the person's time from start to finish, and then you look at the normative scores that are found here. So the thing I want to point out, and you'll find this regarding the 40-yard dash as well as the other tests that are outlined by the book for speed and agility, they're all for youth and college age. There really isn't anything there for adults. And if you do a deep dive and try to find data points regarding speed for adults, it's not like you can find a lot of research on that, as you'll see. But let's just take for instance. Here we have somebody who's 16 to 18 years old and say they run a 5.5 40-yard dash. They would be considered fast. Somebody who would run a 6.7-ish up to 7.2, they would be considered slow. Now, these charts are at best a little mooky, I'll have to admit. You'd love to have some kind of normative range in here and have a little better understanding of what this range is for good, or what would be the 95th percentile versus the 5th percentile, but they just don't have that in the book, unfortunately, although I'd really like to have those data points. So when you look at this over here, they have it also categorized by male, female, and different sports, so you can take a look as well. What I did is I went out and I found a little bit of research, if you will. It's not the best of research, but I did find a little bit just for norms for different age groups. So you can find these in terms of what would be an average 40-yard dash time for somebody who's 46 to 50 years old. You're talking 5 to 5.3, right in that range. And if you so choose, you can deep dive into this a little bit more, but at this point, you're not going to be obligated to know this stuff. I thought it'd be kind of a fun little factoid for you to have there. All right, so 300-yard shuttle. With the 300-yard shuttle, it's been around for easily decades, if not 50 years. And the 300-yard shuttle, you have a start line and a turnaround line. It's 25 yards away. And it's sprint, 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 sprint 6 times to give you your 300 yards, right? So it's 25 down, 25 back, that'd be 50, 25 down, 25 back, that'd be 50 or 100. You can do the rest of the math. Now, this type of test, 300-yard shuttle, is, the first test, the 40-yard dash, was more about acceleration. The 30-yard shuttle is all about anaerobic lactic endurance capacity and agility. because you have the individual who has to sprint. So there's sprinting mechanics that are involved with this. There's a touch and go here, and then they have to sprint back. Again, they have to accelerate out of this, use good mechanics, decelerate, touch and go back the other way. So there is a component of agility that's tied into this that's not inherent to, say, like the 40-yard dash. But no doubt about it, if we look at this on a continuum, this is all about the person's ability to tolerate lactic acid and all about their ability to operate kind of in the anaerobic lactic endurance capacity zone and see what they can actually handle. It is not fun, and I can tell you as somebody who's an athlete who's done this, and also I've had my athletes do this, I work this into training programs where maybe every third week we do 300-yard shuttles, and there'll be for example, during the first microcycle, even first mesocycle, we might do 2 separated by a minute, and then we have a 3-minute rest. Then we do 2 separated by a minute. Then we have a 3-minute rest, and you do 2 separated by a minute. Then we have 3-minute rest, or that's when they pass out. And then when you get into the next mesocycle, you do 3 separated by a minute with a 3-minute rest, etc. So you can increase your volume on this as you go through a workout. So usually what happens with these tests is you're introducing these tests, you're finding ways to perfect these tests, and then you're testing individuals on these at the end of a particular mesocycle to gauge performance. And again, if you have a client who's coming in fresh, who you've never worked with, who's been a couch potato or sat at a desk, and to ask them to do a 300-yard shuttle, it's not going to work out well for that client, and you probably won't have a client thereafter. I'll tell you that right now. But just realize that these tests are all a result of, and programming is driven towards these tests. So we look at the norms for this. You have typical, fast, and slow. The lower the time, the faster it is. And the way I normally would implement this test is I would have my athletes run the test, and then we have the 3-minute recovery, of which I'm running 2 more flights of a 300-yard shuttle. And then group A goes back to the line and they do a second 300-yard shuttle, and you have to do that within 10%. So if they ran the first one in 60 seconds, they would have to run the next one up to 66, right? And so that's how I would gauge a person's ability to basically process and tolerate lactic acid, which you'll find in any athletic endeavor is part of it, right? You have to be able to process and tolerate that discomfort when you play a sport. So again, you have the different norms for each one of these. You can see a sport like soccer where they are running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all day long. You can understand why they would score so well on this. All right, let's jump into the T-test. T-test, it's a course that's set up with a cone 10 yards apart, and then it's 5 to the left, and then from that center cone 5 to the right. So it really is, in essence, a 10, 5, 10, 5, 10 type of shuttle. And it's good for agility, it's good for change of direction. And the thing I like about this drill with athletics is you have multiple changes of direction within the drill itself. Like anything else, we can train for this and we can drive the programming towards this goal to increase performance. I don't think you would find that many of your participants would be able to pull this test off and do so. Now, when you guys do this for your lab, I'll definitely want the feedback, and that'll be one of the questions is how did you perform on this and what do you think of your performance? Because when you look at this test and to be able to really do this and master these kind of tests that you see like in an NFL combine or different sport combines, you know, it requires a certain amount of training and also an attention to detail regarding change of direction so you're not wasting movement. You know, it requires such a high degree of efficiency to run these things, to run these tests at what would be considered elite level. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the results on this. When you look at the classifications again, please notice college age individuals. And typical would be 10-5. Slow is out here to the right. Fast is a lower time. Again, males look like they're scoring a little bit higher than females in general. And if we go ahead and take a look at this, they don't really break this out too well in terms of different sports, but they do break it out just in terms of gender. Now, if we go ahead and take this and switch up, pro agility. The pro agility is many times referred to either as a 20-yard shuttle or a 5-10-5, so named because you start in the middle and you sprint to the left 5 yards, you sprint to the right 10 yards, and you sprint back through this line for 5 yards, 5-10-5. So think of it like the T without the T, right? It's just the top part where you're doing the 5-10-5 component. Now the pro agility test, again, it's something where the movement pattern is so tight and so small that it requires such an attention to detail that when you ask a person who's coming in off of the street who's never done one of these tests before to do this, they probably won't score very well. But when you start teaching them how to actually change their elevation, how to accelerate and decelerate in the context of 10 yards, and then lean into the drill, etc., all the little nuanced things that you have, they will have an increase of performance. But again, I don't see a 50-year-old client doing this unless they come in and say they're going to be playing the sport of basketball at a league level against their friends. So here are some norms for the pro agility. We can look at the different sports and kind of get an idea here in terms of how it maps out. In general, we have these female sports up top, male sports on the bottom, and you can maybe, if you want to run a comparison, you got basketball versus basketball, and softball versus baseball would be very similar. But again, if you look at this, you have the average in the middle, you have faster to the left, slower to the right, and if I point this out one more time, I'm going to point out 100 times, it's still NCAA Division I athletes. So guys, again, when you look at testing for the people that come in that you're going to work with, most of the people that you're going to work with probably won't do a 5-10-5 shuttle. But I will say this, if you're working with somebody who is older, you will work on footwork, but it'll be more about minimizing trip and slips as opposed to getting a 10.5 second time on the T, the T test. So to that end, guys, when you do your labs for these, make sure you denote the time and make sure you take note of how you do on these and how you felt as you're running them, because you'll be asked about that later on. All right, guys, have a great one. Bye.